Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about the newest additions to the Pokemon video game series, Pokemon Sword and Shield. These games have been mired in controversy pretty much all year in the lead up to the release. And then when they finally came out this past week and people saw and started to play the product themselves, things got immensely worse for them. Yes, and eventually we're going to get to today's main headline too, about how some Pokemon fans are so angry about this new release, they're asking President Trump to step in and stop the sale of the game. More on that later, but first, let's talk about why everyone's so angry and what went wrong with this new Pokemon game. This can be explained basically as saying the developers promised much more than they could deliver this year. We also talked about the controversy leading up to things earlier this year too, where fans were first fawning over a new pro-minority gym leader, but more importantly, and to support today's point, back then over the summer, fans were already complaining about how Game Freak, this game's maker, they announced that hundreds of Pokemon characters were being cut for this new game, not giving the fans the full and complete roster that they'd hoped for. This issue was explained away in a way that actually made things worse later on too, because Game Freak's excuse for not including all the Pokemon was they didn't have enough time and wanted to focus on putting more time into the rest of the game. This comment came back to bite them in the ass when leaks started to spread about this game just last week, just a few days before it was set to release. At that time, players not only discovered that the developers were essentially lying about things, but also many more things seemed to be wrong with the game than should be. First, the Pokemon characters used recycled art and animations from previous games, pretty much negating Game Freak's claim that they needed time to focus on other things like this, which turned out to not get much time put into them actually. And then, the overall resolution of the game and the quality of its animations were also very questionable too. This game boasted about being a bigger and better version than all the previous ones after all. And also, it's worth noting here that this was the first Pokemon game in the main series to appear on a major at-home console and not a portable one like Game Boy or Nintendo DS. Granted, the Nintendo Switch is a hybrid that's portable too, but the point still stands here. This was supposed to be a big upgrade, but it's clearly not. It's actually, in some ways, a step back. Pokemon Sword and Shield was supposed to be this huge, revolutionary, dramatic introduction into a new system of gaming, and it was supposed to be a monumental step forward for the series too, moving to this main console, the Nintendo Switch, but as we can see already, that dream is clearly dying quickly. And all this controversy and the problems exposed, well, we're only getting started here today. After the leak started to spread last week, a hashtag sprung up saying Game Freak lied, a pretty bold claim that's mostly supported when you look at all these things. And here, on this website Video Game 24/7, they go over where Game Freak specifically lied in this article, most notably in this section that says, more specifically, the modders dug up polygon counts for the different Pokemon 3D models in Sword and Shield and compared them with their counterparts in Pokemon Sun and Moon. To their surprise, many of the examples they found were used as is or barely upgraded. A post showing a few of these examples has over 18,000 upvotes on Reddit. Given that Game Freak previously promised that all Pokemon models will be new in Sword and Shield, fans believe they've been lied to, hence the hashtag. This is particularly shocking to many of those already upset about the lack of a national Pokedex in the game, a decision Game Freak said was made to ensure higher quality of assets on Switch. Wow, just wow. Talk about a shit show, huh? And sure, Pokemon has been recycling assets for years, but when they say specifically they're going to update them all, and this is what's taking time away from other requested features, well, that certainly isn't a good look, and it is pretty much a lie. And this is not a proper updated major new release for the Pokemon series either. We're basically getting another edition of one of Pokemon's very regular and often releases, but this time it just happens to be on the Switch, which means it now costs $20 more than usual for no good reason other than Nintendo and Pokemon want more money. And it's worse than just reuse models too, guys. As I mentioned earlier, the resolution is shit on this game as well, and it's not even in high definition a lot of the time. Also, there's loads of bugs in it too, and there's some of the bad looking kinds of bugs and also the kinds that crash the game, and even some people's saves are being corrupted too. And then there's just some stuff that might not seem too low quality or that terrible at first glance, but it certainly comes off as lazy and unfinished when you notice it. For example, here's a tweet from Dominic that makes a good point. He starts off by quoting a Game Freak representative apparently, who says something like, "We already have well over 800 Pokemon species, and there's going to be more added in these games. And now that they're on the Nintendo Switch, we're creating it in much higher fidelity with higher quality animations. Hashtag Game Freak lied." Sounds like that didn't happen already. And if you watch along to this video that's attached to that tweet, check it out in the background here while I'm talking, and you can clearly see that that quote is not very accurate. Game Freak did lie. Or perhaps you could say calling it a lie is a bit subjective. Perhaps the developers wanted the game to turn out better and they just failed and couldn't pull it off, but it certainly seems like they gave up too early and they didn't even want to finish the game. Looks like they released it unfinished here and they just wanted to make more money by not hiring more staff and taking more time it would take to complete this. I mean, this animation we're watching here is supposed to be from a new main console 2019 video game, but instead of having real attack animations and effects and stuff and showing this character doing an actual double kick like what's supposed to be happening in this scene, well, instead, Game Freak stuck with their lazy 1990 style animation, one they've been using in this game series on Game Boys for decades. Instead of showing the actual moves, the characters just jump up and down slightly and shake in place or change color sometimes too, but that's a total joke here. Can you actually believe Nintendo is charging $60 for this game now? Can you believe Game Freak looked over this game and said, yeah, we're done here guys. Nothing more needed to be worked on. Let's sell this thing and call it a day. Simply amazing. Another example of Game Freak's laziness here can be seen in this next tweet, which mocks the company for cutting over 400 Pokemon and then bragging about people being able to go inside all the houses, only to see copy and pasted rooms within each said house. So what's the point of going in all of these places if they're all the same when you go inside, and also, there's nothing of value or any reason to go inside of them anyway. There's no NPCs or anything to find within those houses, so what's the point? And this brings us to another complaint about this game and the towns and cities within it. They're often very big but very empty, and they're nothing more than another screen and a recycled background for you to scroll through, desperately trying to add time to the game's play length. And by the way, the playtime on this game is still horrendously low too. Many of the game's playthroughs online are barely adding up to 10 hours. This is staggeringly low, especially for a full price $60 main console video game coming out for the holiday season no less. As a counterexample, let's talk about another recent game that came up on this show, Death Stranding. This was a major AAA release that came out about a week or so ago, and while it's not a game for everyone certainly, and it's not as famous or widespread as Pokemon, but at least you can't argue with the fact that Death Stranding gives you your money's worth. In fact, Death Stranding's cutscenes alone outlast the entire Pokemon Sword and Shield game, and then you of course have to count the gameplay of Death Stranding, which will get you at least 20 or 40 more hours depending on how many side missions you play through. So really, a game like Death Stranding has almost an infinite amount of gameplay. With its radiant side missions and replayability factor, you could put in easily 50, 60, or 100 hours one day. And sure, Pokemon has some of that too. They have a few side missions and slight replayability, but there's no way you could stretch out a single playthrough into the 40 plus hours it takes to beat Death Stranding or any other respectable major AAA release. That finally brings us back to the Trump angle to all of this. An article from the New York Post has more details. It's called "Furious Pokemon Fans Want Trump to Block Sales of Sword and Shield." This should be good. Let's go ahead and check it out. Furious Pokemon fans want President Trump to halt sales of the franchise's newest video game amid a string of controversies. One fan created an official White House petition Tuesday demanding the commander-in-chief take executive action against Pokemon Sword and Shield in the wake of accusations that the title's developer lied about why it cut some characters. The developer, Game Freak, and Japanese gaming giant Nintendo are negatively impacting the market with questionable decisions, the petition declares. We as both Pokemon fans but more importantly American citizens believe this is violating our market rights and need something done about this, according to the petition, which had about 200 signatures as of Thursday morning. Now that's pretty interesting. Really goes to show how upset some of these Pokemon fans have become, and also how far they will go to try and fix this. I sure hope the developer Game Freak is seeing something like this and understanding they're going to need to fix this game themselves one day with some kind of patch or update or something, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that either. And do I think Trump or the federal government necessarily need to get involved here? Not really, unless there's some kind of greater sales or ethics violation about the company lying about this, then I would say we just flog them in the court of public opinion. But it is interesting to see the Pokemon fans unite and try and take action, albeit in a bit of an over-the-top way here. This is also a good time to keep in mind Pokemon is no small potatoes either. They're not some smaller up-and-coming company that wouldn't be able to handle a project like this. So make no mistake, they're not even close to that. Actually, the Pokemon franchise is worth $90 billion, and they're the most profitable media franchise ever. So there's really no excuse for them cheaping out here and not putting in the time and effort effort and money to complete Sword and Shield properly and make the game right. And keeping all that in mind, it does make it seem more like this company is pulling something shifty here, or possibly illegal, some kind of bait and switch tactic with false advertising involved too. And that might actually warrant a petition like this and a request for President Trump to have a look over things and sort this all out. The plea will get an official response from the White House if it gets 100,000 signatures in 30 days. Game Freak reportedly infuriated fans with its June announcement that some Pokemon would not be transferred to Sword and Shield. The pair of companion games for the Nintendo Switch is set to be released Friday. Game Freak officials later said that was because they had to rebuild all the character models from scratch to work with the Switch console's improved graphics system. But some game data miners who examined Sword and Shield character models claim this week that they're exactly the same as those used in Pokemon Sun and Moon, the series' previous installment, Forbes reported. The alleged revelation led the hashtag GameFreakLied to trend on Twitter. The Pokemon company, which markets the franchise, did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the controversy. I'll bet they didn't comment. The Pokemon company should be shaking in their booties right now. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they were just sitting back and getting ready to go on extended vacations for the holidays too. I mean, this is the company who dared to make such bold promises and then release a game without them, even lacking more than previously thought. And I wouldn't be too upset about the reused models they went with either, but using that as an excuse to cut the roster and then lying about it is certainly poor form, and it's borderline scandalous. And as the reviews start to come out, the game seems like it may be par for course for a Pokemon series now, a solid but lacking outing in some areas. But in terms of delivering on promises and being a forward step for this series, Pokemon Sword and Shield definitely failed and fell well short of expectations. It's a real shame too. I really liked this series over the years, but nothing has really sold me on a new Pokemon game since the black and white versions came out. I imagine plenty will still get much enjoyment out of this new game, and good for them. I really am happy to see it, but I also can't help but feel a bit sour about this whole situation. Pokemon certainly duffed up their main series and main console release this year, that's for sure. So here's to hoping they do something to try and fix this soon, or maybe in the future they decide to make a better game one day later. What do you guys think? Did Game Freak lie, like how the hashtag stated? Will you be playing this new Pokemon game one day? Or do you think President Trump should stop the sales of it like what was suggested by that petition? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.